Hey everyone, it's Caitlin and welcome to another video. In this video, I'm going to show you how I style my food photos and give you guys some tips that you can apply to your own photography in order to improve your own work. This video is also sponsored by Skillshare, an online learning community with over 17,000 different classes and tutorials. I have previously shown you guys how I film my YouTube videos in a past video, which I will link below. And today I'm going to cover how I style my food photos, but that does vary from person to person. And what I am not going to cover is how I use my DSLR camera to take my food photos. However, Skillshare is great for this. They have a ton of different tutorials on photography and food styling and pretty much any other topic you could think of as well outside of the realm of photography and food. Personally, I watched several different tutorials on Skillshare myself, and I particularly liked this one, which basically breaks down everything you ever need to know about taking photos based on what camera you have. I also liked this course, which touched on photo composition, and I thought this course was interesting as well, which talks about food styling from different moods. I also love Skillshare because all the classes are broken down into smaller videos which are very easily digestible and easy to watch. So even if you're busy or you don't have too much time, you can still take a few minutes to learn something new. So if you want to try out Skillshare, they're offering you guys a free 2-month trial to Skillshare Premium, in which you have unlimited access to all of their classes. So if that sounds interesting to you, you can go ahead and click the link below to check it out. That's all I have to say for that. So let's get on to food styling. Today I'm going to be showing you guys how I shot and styled these little energy bites. I chose these because they are fairly easy to shoot, and that way it will be easier for me to demonstrate basic compositional techniques for you all. However, you can apply any of these things in this video to any type of food that you're shooting. You could even apply it to other non-food items as well. So first, when it comes to taking food photos, you want to keep in mind the area that you're going to be taking photos in and your prop selection. So I like to shoot with natural light, so I shoot by a big window in my apartment. And then in terms of the actual background, I have a custom-made photography board that I shoot on. However, if you're just starting out, you can go to the hardware store, get some wood tiles, or you can just use a surface you already have in your house. And then in terms of props, as I set up my area, I also look at my prop shelf and I pick out props that I think I'm going to use for a shoot. So these are all the props that I selected to shoot these energy bites. So as you can see here, I have my energy bites on a plate, and I'm actually not going to shoot them on this plate. That's what I was just storing them on. And then over here, I have a few separate ingredients that I actually used in the recipe. I will touch on why I have those a little bit later. But as you can see, I already poured one into a sort of stylized glass. And then for my other props, I chose other things that are circles because the theme of repetition is really good. And as you can see, all of the colors are really complementary as well. So I have this smaller dish that I'm probably going to put something in. I have some wooden spoons that are pretty much a very similar color to the balls that I am shooting. And then there is a wood line on the plate which matches the cutting board, and there's also another line on the small dish. And then there's a gold rim around the bowl which also matches. So as you can see, everything is different, but it's kind of similar. And then I also have a larger glass that matches the ingredient glass, but I actually ended up not using that. So now that you have your area and your props, now you're going to want to think about lighting. I prefer to shoot in natural light. I find that the white balance is the best, which basically just means that the color white is a true white. However, when you're shooting with natural light, you want to keep in mind where the light is coming from. So in general, there are 3 ways to shoot with the light, and I'm going to show you photos of each of them so you can sort of compare and contrast, because I know sometimes when people just talk about it to you, it's a little bit harder to visualize. So the first way, which is actually one of my preferred ways to shoot, is with the light behind you. So the photo is backlit because the lighting is coming from the back. So here I have the energy balls in front of the light source, and I'm shooting in front of the bowl of balls. And when you shoot with a backlighting, this makes the photo really dramatic, and it makes the shadows and the contrast really high, which I personally like for my photos. However, one thing when you do shoot with backlighting is that sometimes it can be too dramatic and the front of the image will be really dark because there is no light sort of shining on that surface. So an easy way to remediate this is to use a reflector. This is the one I have. I got on Amazon. I will link it below. It's really inexpensive, but basically what it does is it bounces the light from the back to the front and then back to the bowl. So the food that is normally on the front that wouldn't have light hitting on it does have some light reflecting off of it. So here are two photos side by side without the reflector and then with the reflector. And as you can see, it is a little bit lighter. Another thing about backlit photos is that if you're shooting in RAW, it's really easy to recover the shadows in post editing. So I personally still like to shoot with backlighting, or I prefer to shoot with side lighting, which is the next thing. So now I've moved the balls, so the way the light is going to hit them, it's going to hit them from the sides. And side lighting is kind of like backlighting because it still creates some shadow, so there is more contrast in it. I also shoot with side lighting sometimes. It just depends on the current situation, but it is nice because you still get that contrast, and in general the food is a little bit more illuminated. And you can kind of play with side lighting. So if you imagine a clock, you could have the light coming in at like 9 o'clock, which would be directly the side. You could also have like 10 o'clock, so it's a little bit kind of backlit, kind of like side lit. So you can really experiment and see what's working for you. But again, with side lighting, I usually like to use my reflector to bounce the shadows to the other side because sometimes the contrast is just too strong. And then finally, the third way to shoot photos is with the light straight on. And I personally would not recommend this. As you can see from the shot I took here, one, it's kind of hard to take a photo because you're kind of standing in the way of the light. And two, there is really no contrast or depth of field in the photo because all the light's just coming straight on and shining on the thing you want. So you're not really creating any illumination around the back or shadows in the back. So in general, your photos look kind of flat. Last thing I'm going to say about lighting is just for all these methods, you always want your lighting to be diffused. You never want to shoot in direct sunlight. So I'm shooting through a window so the light just comes through naturally. You would never want to stand like outside with the sun directly shining on your food because that produces shadows that are way too harsh. So that's pretty much all of the setup for our shot. So now we're going to actually work on composing our shot. One of the things that I think can most elevate your food photos is to tell a story with your food photos. So when I first started taking photos, I would definitely just be like, hey, I made some vegan mac and cheese. Take a photo of the mac and cheese in the bowl with a fork maybe, and that's it. But that doesn't really give your audience like sort of a feel for the photo, or the photo doesn't really have any mood to it. So I like to add in extra props or ingredients so a person can visualize as if they were actually making the recipe at home, or if they're sitting down to dinner to enjoy the meal. So for my Energy Bite photo shoot, I decided to have some of the ingredients on the side to put into the shoot to make it seem like you just made this recipe yourself and some of the ingredients are still lying around. And then I filmed a little time lapse of myself actually taking the shot. So after you have your ingredients and your props and everything that you want to include in the photo, you're just going to start shooting. So I usually like to set all the food up in one way, and then I slowly rearrange my props. And it does really take practice and moving things like a millimeter to the right or a millimeter to the left, or sometimes a shot just isn't working and you need to add something different in. So you sort of experiment, and then once I am happy with taking photos in both portrait and landscape mode for my blog, then I switch up the items and I try to take it using a different angle. My next tip for composition is to have items partially out of the frame. So as you could see from my time lapse, I was moving a lot of ingredients around and I was taking photos from different angles. Sometimes the photos were further away and sometimes the photos were a little bit more close up. And so I'm going to put some photos on the screen now. When you have all of the items completely in the frame, sometimes the negative space just looks a little weird. But if, for example, you do a close-up of something and you have some items that are still in the photo frame, but the items aren't completely in it, it gives the sense that the space is larger and it makes it seem sort of more realistic. And then finally, I just want to touch on 2 general rules of composition that come to taking photos. You don't always have to follow these rules. I don't always follow these rules, but generally speaking, it is agreed on that these rules produce visually appealing photos. So the first rule is the rule of thirds, and sometimes I like to shoot through the live view of my camera because it actually does show me this grid. It would basically be like if this video frame was dissected into thirds. So it would be 2 lines here and 2 lines going here to make a grid. So when you're shooting with the rule of thirds, you want your objects to be either on these lines or at the intersection points of the grid, and that sort of helps the photo to be a little bit more balanced. So here's an example of a shot that I took that demonstrates the rule of thirds. And then another quick compositional tip is to use an S-curve, which is basically like if you look at all of the items in a photo, you can sort of draw an S through them. So this photo demonstrates a slight S-curve, and it just helps the viewer's eyes to travel through the photo, and it looks pretty nice and visually appealing. That being said, sometimes I don't follow the rule of thirds, and I just center an object, which is also perfectly appropriate as well. It really takes a lot of experimentation and seeing what works for you. And those are all of my tips, guys. Now, I will say that it is one thing to listen to a person talk about photography, and it's another thing to do it yourself. So my best advice that I can give to you guys is practice, practice, practice. Everyone has to start somewhere. So take these tips and try to photograph a bunch of different food items. And if you're still looking for more help on composition or using your camera, I would highly suggest you check out Skillshare. Like I said in the beginning of this video, if you click the link below, you can get a free 2-month premium trial with access to all of their courses, and they have a ton of courses on photography. So that's it for this video. If you guys want more videos like this, definitely let me know in the comments below and give me a thumbs up so I know to film more like them. And if you're new to my channel and you like what you see here, feel free to hit that little subscribe button right down there. I post 2 new videos every single week. So that's it for now. I hope you guys have a great day, and hopefully I will see you in the next video. Bye!